Yes. So I wasn't quite ready to start the video, but clearly Audie was. He has not paid us a visit in a while. He was sulking when it was hot. He was sulking when it was raining. And it's neither hot nor raining today, but he still seems to be sulking. So I'm revising my theory on this. I think it's just cranky cat business. And no matter what he gets, it's not quite good enough. Well, okay. I guess we solved that problem. We did have a few seconds of Audie time. I guess that's all we're getting. Many of you may recall, if you've watched these videos for a while, that when Catherine was in treatment for cancer, I went through this whole thing of wearing yellow, just as a symbolic well-wish, not just for Catherine, but for everyone who was coping with cancer, for the people who were actually afflicted by the illness, for their loved ones, their friends, because cancer is very non-discriminating. It's not just something that the person immediately dealing with cancer has to cope with. Their friends, their family, everyone around them has to cope with it. And I made a point of mentioning one of our viewers' mothers, and that is our little viewer Lex, our Gen Z baby, who keeps us tracked in to what is going on with the very youngest of our viewing audience. And unfortunately, Lex's mom lost her battle with cancer this past weekend. Sorry about that. I had to take a little break and sort of reground myself, make sure I was clear about where we're going with this. I am going to pin a comment below so that any of you who wish to offer condolences are able to do so in one little concise spot. So, I wish we had better news to begin with, but because many of you had followed Lex's mom's journey. Her name is Alona, by the way. Isn't that a gorgeous name? Many of you had followed the journey. I am sorry it didn't have a happier ending, but it's not the kind of thing I would have been comfortable keeping from you. So, we are going to take a quick break for the intro, and then we will be back. And this evening, we are talking about the sock puppet. So, we have gone from some rather disheartening news to the sock puppet, who is always good for a laugh. We'll be back in a minute. So, it looks like I was so distracted by the unexpected presence of a cat that I forgot to mention who we are and what we're doing. So, this is just Chattin. This is the series of videos we do Thursday and Sunday evenings just for our own entertainment. So now that that's out of the way, let me start with a little sort of lighthearted story. There is a British television show, a comedy, and it's called Spitting Image. And this comedy apparently features puppets of famous or well-known people, celebrities, politicians, whatever. I have never seen any of this show, with the exception of a portion of the episode we're going to discuss. And that is called The Rest is Bullshit, which is a little send-up of the sock puppet. Now, this is a puppet show, and of course it features Harry the sock puppet in this episode. I don't know. I think that might be just a little too on point for my taste, but what can I tell you? And the premise, which I do find funny, is that the sock puppet, with no discernible skills or talents or even valuable opinions, has decided that that qualifies him to make a career for himself as a podcaster. So, the sock puppet, in puppet form, is putting on a little podcast show with his sidekick, a really scary little Paddington Bear type creature. Yeah, very scary. And they are dealing with other puppet characters, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Zelensky, and Starmer of the UK. And I have to say that I found this a little raunchy for my tastes. And do keep in mind that I grew up in the era in which pornography, drugs, and profanity were very much used as substitutes for comedy. So it's not like I'm not used to this. It's just that I'd like to think I have personally evolved past that point. I no longer find these things funny in and of themselves. I'd like a joke to be in there somewhere. So, as I mentioned, the link is in the video notes. If you want to watch this, and I'm certainly not trying to discourage you, I would suggest that you just scoot the little ones out of the room first, because this is not family-friendly video content. What was really interesting to me is the fact that this is coming out of the UK, and they have no problem doing a complete send-up and mockery of Harry. So that is telling you that not only is their star dipping fast on the US horizon, it's probably doing the same thing in the UK. So, moving away from that, let's talk about why I'm seeing patterns here. Sorry, quick break for the giant farm equipment to pass by. Whoa. In my area, summertime is just an excuse to bring out like massive, combines and harvesters, and yeah. So we're probably going to have a few more breaks before we're done. All right. So the Spit and Image episode, I think, is symptomatic of something that is happening all over. And a lot of this is tracing back to Sally Bedell Smith, who is a journalist, and she apparently has very close connections with the British royal family. I say had because obviously the late Queen has passed, and the late Queen's cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson, has also passed. And Ms. Smith has released some information. Well, it's actually sort of an ongoing story. I found this on a platform called Substack. I found it very difficult to work with that platform, to get into it, to do whatever I was supposed to do to get the content. But I will eventually crack that one. And Ms. Smith was quoting rather extensively from conversations she had with Lady Elizabeth Anson. And Lady Elizabeth was the cousin of the late Queen, and they were apparently very close friends. And it was not just a relationship with the Queen. Lady Anson had relationships with other members of the royal family, some of whom are still with us, although, again, Lady Anson herself is not. So these are very good sources. And the story that Sally Bedell Smith has released indicates that not just the Queen, but apparently other members of the royal family were keenly aware that Nutmeg's intrusion into their family might not be the wonderful, earth-shattering welcome event that Harry the Sock Puppet thought it was. people questioned whether or not Nutmeg had any genuine interest in Harry, or if her interest was simply in the title, the wealth. In other words, is this a love match, or is this just another rung on the ladder of a social climbing adventuress? I have to say, it's not likely that anyone in the royal family, with two exceptions, I'll get into those in a moment, two exceptions, was unprepared for what happened with Megxit. Unprepared for Harry running off with Nutmeg to California, trashing the family, Lord only knows what else. It seems very likely that some of them, particularly the late Queen, had some inkling of what was happening pretty much from the time before Harry and Nutmeg got married. However, to be fair, I think anybody looking at this up close, especially anybody who had been up close to the whole incident with Wallace and Edward, the abdication, etc., as the Queen was. And to be fair, she was a small child when this was going on. However, she grew up with her parents who were not small children, and undoubtedly gave her the inside scoop on everything that went on. So, is it surprising that she would have looked at Nutmeg and seen an interloper, an adventuress, a social climber? Is it surprising that she would have looked at Harry, who is clearly no brighter than his great-great-uncle, the Duke of Windsor, who, by the way, was definitely not the sharpest tool in the box, and seen the parallels? I would say, of course, that would have been obvious to someone like the late Queen. I think it would have been obvious to anyone close to the royal family, because these people have to have been raised knowing that they were potential targets for people who were interested in hooking up with them, not for them, but for the title, for the power, well, there's not a lot of power, but there's certainly money and social prestige, the cachet of being in the royal family. That has to be something discussed over the dinner table in royal households. You know, the way bedtime or, what you're doing in school is discussed in households all over the country. So we have these stories now, and they do not look good for the sock puppet. Yes, the Queen was aware, and yes, the Queen was very badly hurt by the sock puppet's actions. I don't think any of us could doubt that. I think the only thing that was standing in our way of accepting this was, one, reasonably credible proof, and something from Lady Elizabeth Anson, the Queen's much-loved cousin and confidant. Yeah, that's pretty close to credible proof in my book. And the fact that I think most of us were hoping that the people around the late Queen, given her advanced years and failing health, would have tried their best to protect her from all of the trash that Nutmeg and the sock puppet were spitting out about the royal family. I think most of us were hoping she just didn't know how bad it was. And unfortunately, apparently she did know how bad it was. And that is what's coming out now. And as I said, two people in the royal family who probably didn't see this coming were Charles and William. Why? Because they loved Harry. I don't know if they still do. I have no idea what's going on for them, but certainly they did have strong emotional bonds to this pathetic sock puppet, and therefore I think it wasn't likely that they saw it coming. Everybody else, yeah, pretty much. So when we start to look at this and see where this is leading, basically it's been leading to open season on the sock puppet. So the spitting image, I was about to call it a cartoon, but it isn't really a puppet show. The spitting image puppet show, I think, is one of many send-ups we are going to see, because I think at this point, as far as Harry is concerned, the gloves are off. All of the people who said, well, poor dim-witted Harry was taken by the hand and led down the primrose path, are starting to reevaluate this and starting to look at things like, yeah, well, was he really led down the primrose path? What about his responsibility? And certainly I would say he has a great deal of responsibility for what he did to his British relatives, but he also has a great deal of responsibility for what he's currently doing in the United States, which is absolutely meddling in our politics. Harry dislikes our First Amendment rights. He's called them bonkers. He admitted he doesn't know anything about the First Amendment, and I don't think he realizes there are 5 separate rights tied up in the First Amendment, but he's an idiot, right? So what do you expect? But he thinks it's all bonkers, and he is actively working to stifle freedom of speech. Now he's doing it under the guise of protecting children from the evils of social media. How? By censoring the content, which is something we don't do. And any efforts he makes to undermine our First Amendment rights should be considered intolerable, not just by all Americans, but by all the Brits as well, because our British cousins know their royal family is forbidden to get involved in politics. And if crusading against free speech and for censorship is not political, well, then I don't know what political is. So yeah, open season on the sock puppet all over. And again, I think people are revising their opinion. They are no longer seeing him as the innocent victim of a scheming woman. Poor dumb Harry. What did you expect? Well, yeah, he's an idiot, but he's also an idiot with a political agenda and has no problem attempting to impose his political agenda on us in the U.S., where we have protections for free speech, and we all know that he could care less about the social media damage to children. All he really wants is a mechanism by which he and his charming wife can stifle free speech that criticizes them. That's the real agenda. So let's move on to the final issue I wanted to take on, and that is that there are stories in the media coming out now that the reason Nutmeg and the sock puppet are culling their staff is because they're running into financial trouble. Well, let's start with, of course, they're running into financial trouble. They will spend more money on a private plane ferrying them from California to New York than most people make in a year. So yeah, they are just piddling through money faster than it's coming in. Nutmeg cannot leave the house without wearing a good $50,000 worth of wrinkled and ill-fitting designer clothing. And we all know this because we've seen it time and time again. So yeah, they don't have the money to back up this extravagance. And the only way they're going to get the money is for the sock puppet to do what he sort of vaguely threatened to do in the past, which is release Spare 2.0, more tawdry stories about his family, make more money, well, by throwing his family under the bus, by violating the implied confidences that one has within a family. I don't think it's appropriate for anybody to air their family linen in public. We have that expression for a reason. No one seems to feel this is appropriate, except, of course, for Harry and Nutmeg. So that's their only vehicle for making more money. But I'm not 100% sure that is actually the reason the staff people are fleeing like rats departing a sinking ship. I think this news story is actually being spread by the Sussex camp. Why? Because even more people are leaving, and they want to set up a competing narrative. They would rather be seen as financially strapped than that we understand the staffers are leaving because it's impossible to work with Nutmeg and the sock puppet. We know it's impossible to work with Nutmeg because, dictator in high heels. We remember that from the Vanity Fair piece. And the sock puppet apparently is a nice guy. The lights are not on, but he's a nice guy who will come up with insane ideas. My favorite, and I've mentioned this before, is that he and Vladimir Putin should sit down together and compare notes on their childhood trauma. Yeah, because Harry got the smaller bedroom in the castle, while Vladimir Putin lost a brother to starvation. Starvation, for God's sake. Really. And I'm sure he could really relate to, oh yeah, smaller bedroom in the castle. The sock puppet is not just a moron, but he's completely out of touch with reality. I think he's got too much white powder up his nose. It's starting to fog his brain. Well, it's been fogging his brain for many years, I think. So I think they would prefer, we all think, that they can't afford the staff rather than the reality, which is a drug-addled nincompoop throwing insane ideas out to a staff who are feeling some obligation to smile and say, oh yes, Harry, that's a brilliant idea, let's do it right away. Or Nutmeg looking at people saying, do you even know what you're doing? Do you even have a place in this organization? Maybe you should go home and take a nap. People don't want to work for them. So whether or not they can afford the staff is probably irrelevant, because even if they had limitless funds, they don't have limitless people willing to put up with their nonsense. So I would have to say my take on that story is no. It's a smokescreen. It's meant to cover up the fact that there's even more staff turnover. By the way, it's been estimated that it's 25 people so far, and that's just since they left the UK. And remember, the folks in the UK referred to themselves as the Sussex survivors. So yeah, if we threw in the people in the UK, I'm sure the numbers would be over 40. I seem to recall the figure of 18 being bounced around years ago when they were in the UK. But again, people leave for a variety of reasons, so I'm not going to commit to that figure because many of the folks who worked for them in the UK were protected by the palace, transferred to other jobs, as they should have been. I'm not saying that was wrong. As they should have been, the workers were abused. So yeah, they need to deal with this. This is a huge blow to their public image that people will not work for them at pay rates of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in jobs that have boatloads of status and prestige. Yeah, all the perks in the world are not getting people to work for them. Well, they are actually getting people in the door, but they're going out just as quickly because these people are impossible to work for. So I would say take the talk of their financial strain with a grain of salt. I'm sure finances are not easy because, in fact, they have a lifestyle far beyond anything that the income we can verify could easily afford them. But remember, I'm sure designer houses are handing Nutmeg those clothes that she is trashing for free. I'm sure they are getting paid for all of their public appearances. We know for a fact they are bumming rides off their celebrity friends so they don't have to pay for the private jets. But I still think, yeah, it's a hard lifestyle to maintain. But is this why staff is turning over? Oh, I don't think so. But imagine how bad things have to get when you'd rather be thought of as poor and indigent than the reality, which is horrible bosses. Okay, so those are the points I wanted to cover today. We're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I'm going to find something cheery that will make me happy because we did have some bad news this evening. I hope to see you all again next time, and in the meanwhile, have a terrific day.